Welcome to the Knock on Archery podcast, where we bring all archers and bow hunters together from all walks of life with the goal to educate, empower, and inspire you to be better both in the field and on the range.
All right, hey everybody, this is PJ Reilly from Lancaster Archery 2023 ATA show in Indianapolis. This is a feature that we call a tech talk from Lancaster Archery. I, of course, am here with John Dudley, Tech Talk, who can talk a lot of tech. That's why we brought him in here. And John, first off, thanks for sitting down with us. We sure appreciate it.
Heck yeah, no place I'd rather be. In the hub of archery right here.
And this morning it was exciting. We got to see you launch the Unite, and this is something that has been in the works for years with you.
Yeah, it actually has. So several years ago, I'm doing this backstory just because there's the new, like the integration part of compound bows right now. I know that's going. And I don't want to be accused of following. Obviously, it's cool that the industry is accepting it. But so even before my first bow with PSE, I had made a drawing of this type of system on a bow.
Yes.
And it came to be because I was going to Alaska and I wanted to be able to fully break down a compound bow to be able to put in a duffel bag for like a super cub. Because like when I had it in there, I'm thinking, you have to you can only have 50 pounds, right? So I was like, if there was a way to actually detach accessories from a compound bow, it would be awesome. But to be able to have the repeatability of an arrow rest and even the sight, like I'm not a fan of, if I had a dovetail style sight, I'd never liked removing it. Like when I went to a target event, I would tighten it back on, I would re-sight in and make sure it's seated properly, but I wouldn't move it again. That would be it.
Right.
So like even now on the hunting bows that have a big knob and a detachable extension sight, I like to take the knob, get rid of it, put the little stubby screw in, lock it in, and don't move it. So I wanted something that was repeatable, and I was asking a buddy of mine who's like a sniper rifle specialist, is there a system to where you can totally take a scope off a rifle and put it back on and it is still 100% dead nuts? And he's like, oh yeah, there definitely is. And so we started talking about that, and I drew on a chalkboard. Well, I'll show you what it looked like. My drawings were not awesome, but so I drew on a chalkboard. Do you see that?
I see that.
So I drew on a chalkboard.
Show that to the camera.
All right. So this was my drawing, and what I wanted to do was make a system to where I could remove my rest, remove the sight, and I actually had that same system down on my stabilizer, but I wanted to be able to mount it back in, and this here we actually haven't done in the industry, but originally I wanted the Picatinny system machined into the riser and then have a plate that was essentially an opposite Picatinny system to where you could then put the plate on to have a flat surface again. So if you wanted to use a regular sight or a regular rest, you could do it without having that. So this was actually the very first drawing that I took to PSE before the NTN came out. And I said hey, if we could get, a rest manufacturer, and at this time it was AAE because that's who I was using, and Nick's like, yeah, I'll do it, I can make it that way. And then we talked about, I actually called Spot Hog and talked to him about doing an extension bar that had the same thing to where it could be put into slots, right? Well, when I went to PSE, they're like, no one is going to accept that. So and I kind of didn't want to come out of the gate just with this whole new thing, what is this guy thinking? So as soon as Matthews did it on the rest, I was like, guys, there's the beginning. I told you. And the name Unite, the name we've trademarked, and you'll actually find out it's been trademarked for a while. The name Unite was because I wanted united accessories to mount onto a bow system.
Right.
So that was originally the name, and it was a little bit too extreme at the time, so we brought out the NTN, which was super solid, great shooter. Then I really focused on people with a budget. You know, the Embark was very passionate to me for getting people into the archery world. And then the Levitate was, you know, my dream come true. And now we've circled back around. A lot of people have reached out and they're like, "Man, I love my NTN. I love an aluminum bow. I like the extra weight." Some people do, and extra weight is nice when shooting. You know, for TAC events or 3D, having a little bit extra mass weight is nice. And so it was time to bring out another flagship aluminum. So the Unite has now came forward a little bit different than how I drew it. I had to go with what the industry has accepted for the mounting system.
Right.
So, and you can detach it, you know, so you can have a front sight on a pick rail if you want. You can have a dovetail on the rear, or the riser thickness and everything is still made to where you can mount normal accessories and everything's going to kind of be in its center line. But just to give you I guess I should talk numbers.
Yeah, go
32 axle to axle, 6.5 on the brace, 338 for speed on the E2 cam. There's a new Easy cam, or it's technically called the EC2 cam, which, you know, I just call it the Easy cam because it's the original Evolve cam that everybody loved, but widened to what I did with the Levitate. And, you know, I really wanted a wider. I wanted a wider cam platform because what's always weirded me out is when you can see axle flex. Does that weird you out? So, like, I always thought, like, widen the space and put a bigger axle in it, and then we don't have something that's flexing like that, you know?
Yes. And then you have, now this one does include they call it the EZ220. I forget the letters for it. Your spacer system in there.
I don't know that system. I know the system. I didn't know there was a name for it.
It has a name, and I keep forgetting because when we first talked about it, it didn't have a name, but now it does. I think it's the EZ220, but it's that spacer system that you can just pop those out. It's much simpler. It's not, you don't have to take the axle off.
Yeah, I have to credit the guys at PSE. I mean, they honestly, since the NTN, I was blown away at how fast the engineers could think, program, and get a production model. I mean, it was insanely fast. So I'll just be 100% transparent because I am. One of the disagreements that I had with PSE was I've never liked a cable rod that even has potential to be moved. So the cable rod system for all the bows that we've done are, you know, they're put in where they need to be so that the cables are exactly on the inside of the riser. There's no ability for that to move. Now the problem, and I shouldn't say it's a problem, what happened with that is the way they were putting the spacers in their cams previously, if you got a tear that didn't work out, they just adjusted the cable rod to change the tear rather than break down the cam out of the limb, change the spacing. Which to me, once again, it comes down to the fact of, like, I wouldn't have to move this if this was in the right spot. So when I did the first bows, like even the NTNs, originally the Evolve cams were all shifted very far left in the system. And if people had that right tear, they would just shift the cable rod. Whereas I would break every bow down, pull the medium off the right next to the thick, move it over to the thin on the left, and I would have everything perfect. So for me as a shooter, even as a target shooter, I could never shoot a system that looked wacky. Like it just, because you do shoot arrows at a tournament, obviously, but you also spend a lot of time standing on the line, loading your arrow, looking at your bow. And when stuff is out of place, it makes you think like, did that get moved or is that where it was? So I'll just show you here. So like the other day, so right here is a picture signing off. So this is when I sent the engineers sign off Gen 7 of the Unite. And I pretty much sent them this picture. So if you're looking, that's the picture I sent them right there. And if you notice that picture and you zoom in, you can see the arrow shaft string arrows running right down the centered machine marks in the riser.
Yeah.
So like there's, that's kind of for just being able to see your center shot. My arrow shaft for a perfect, tune and everything is running down the center of the tiller bolt.
Yeah.
Center of the stabilizer, and then the pin is sitting right on the inside of the outside edge of the arrow shaft. So to me, this represents a system that is not contorting at full draw,
Right.
So I already have the ability with my bow hand and facial pressure and all that. I'm already going to screw this thing up. I don't want it screwed up to begin with. So I'm just a fanatic that way of really wanting something that had torsional stabilities. In fact, like even back when I was at Matthews, all of my personal bows were shifted. The grips were shifted over versus production models. The reason we didn't do it that way is because to have that extra thickness of the billet was like, and because 90% of your billet goes into the garbage, into the recycle bin, it was like the cost of how much extra this bow would have to cost to everyone else buying it versus Dudley, you're being weird about what it looks like. I just feel like all that to me is important as a shooter. So these are all the very, very little methodical things that I think about. And that spacer system goes back to the fact of not everyone wants a cam or because of their hand pressure needs a cam exactly where it should be. And to be able to shim it and adjust it easily and not necessarily have to over yoke tune it, I think is critical. So they came out with this awesome system, and I think it's close to 2 years that I've actually been working on that. If occasionally there's Easter eggs, like in my social media, if you really look, you'll actually see bows that I've shot that had that on there that I wasn't talking about, because one of my concerns was, if you had a removable thing like that, how robust is it? And for me, it's ingrained in me from when I worked under Matt. Matt was he really was adamant about cycle testing, and also dry fire testing, as was Hoyt, very like dry fire tests. They were conscious of it. Yeah. So that was one of the things with me is like, I don't know, like how's this going to handle for like, so we dry fire test it. They go on in a place to where if it is dry fired, that direction is going to where it would actually clip it on rather than pop it off type thing. It's just small little things like that a consumer doesn't think about. These are all things on like why there's so many generations and why I'm methodical to bring it out. But what I will tell you is I was skeptical about that, but I'm also very convinced now, which I think is important to the people that follow us, is they know that I'm all in. I'm all in with this model.
That's key, because I can tell you when we first started talking about this system, people were like, that's going to fly out. Mm-hmm. But here you hear it.
Yeah.
John Dudley.
I said the same thing.
He says now it will not.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's cool about this system as well is the one thing, it seems like no matter what bow I've ever had, like E-clips seem like they've always been the wrong way to do it. Like how many times I've snagged those on my pants or a sweater.
Shot one across the room.
Shoot them across the room. Never fails. So the way this, have you pulled one of these apart?
Yeah.
Have you? It's pretty cool, isn't it?
It is.
So you have a doll similar to what would be like a rocker doll on like, say a Hoyt. There's essentially a dowel that's going all the way through that limb. There's 2 sleeves that go on the end of that to where the limb butts up perfect. And then you actually put 2 torques going opposing directions. You tighten them down. And what's really nice is for a bow builder, or especially a shop, if you need to swap out limbs or swap out a cam on a bow, you can actually tighten this system down, and you can like set it down on the table and it's like taut. The limbs are not flopping all over the place. And when you actually go to clip it in place and assemble it, it's nice when things stay together. Especially with the especially with certain bow presses and stuff that you got to finagle with while you're going through that. So I really like those details, and in my opinion, those little details, they're going to prevent a shop from having to like fully break down this bow. For an archery shop point of view, it's super good for saving time.
Right.
You're not having to pull them out, and it always seemed like the super thin spacers were always the worst. They were like the exact size to fall into the axle slit, to fall into the E-clip slit.
As soon as you got the axle out, those things went everywhere. Like, oh man, how many were there?
So I mean, we've addressed a lot of small details like that. The geometry of this is very similar to the levitate at full draw, and so for me, string angles at full draw are very critical, because that determines technique. If string angle's super severe and sharp, well, now I have to have someone that is maybe overdrawn and a super short loop, and that might affect the type of release that I put in their hand. Right. You can't have that, and someone wants a long neck release. So I mean, the angles and the geometry really mirror that, but as a consumer, now there's 2 cam options. There's the E2 cam, and then I call it the Easy Cam, but it's the EC2 cam.
Yeah.
And that one has a very smooth pull, feels like the original Evolve. What I'll tell people listening, I know a lot of people are like, when there's cam options, do I get the big one and be in the small slot? Do I need the small cam in the big slot?
Right.
What I will tell you is, the E2 cam is the most efficient cam I've ever tested. As you shorten the draw, the efficiency does not dissipate.
Which
like
is usually what you expect.
Yeah. Like, for example, on Hoyts, you always knew if you were on a 1.5 system in the shortest slot, you'd be better off to go to the number 2 cam, put it in the longest slot.
Right.
This actually doesn't work that way. If you're in the shortest slot on an E2 cam, and you would be close to the longest slot on an S2 cam, there's only 1 foot per second difference in the two. The reality is, what does the consumer want? Some consumers love a shorter valley, super bulletproof wall. They almost like to fight their bow. Some people want a super dynamic back end, like ultra dynamic. I want a partially lazy back end, but with a dynamic shot, So for me, on the E2 cam, what I'll tell you is that module has settings. You've got long slots on one side, short slots on the other. And if you think of it that way, A, B, and C, then you've got, D, E in the middle, then it starts to fall off. The cam will feel the best for, if you want just a good feeling cam where you don't have demand, it'll always be the best on either side of that slope. So if you're dead in the center of that cam module, it'll feel the most aggressive, and aggressive probably isn't the best word, because I don't think any of them are like, they're not aggressive cams.
Right.
They might have a little bit tougher breakover. However, on the EC2 cam system, it actually is, if you can think of that module, I would say it's more shaped like this, where the harder part is in the A and B slots. And as you get away from A and B, it'll just get easier and easier and friendlier and friendlier and friendlier on an easy cam or an EC2 cam. So for me, this is a perfect example. If I shoot, this will go to 32 inches max draw with an E2 cam. A lot of times I'll shoot a 30.5 for my hunting situation. So I can shoot this in a C position on an E2 cam, and it feels awesome because it's on the down slope of where that cam feels good.
Right.
When I change this over to an easy cam for me, and I have to shoot an easy cam in an A slot, you're really not gaining. It's not actually easier. It's kind of the same in a different slot. So what I'll tell you is, if you're a shooter to where you're looking at the Unite, or if you're looking at any other PSE bows that have an easy cam option, if you know you're going to be in a C or lower slot, you will feel an easier experience than an E2 cam. However, if you're going to be in the A or B slot, you're probably going to be able to be in one of the other slots on an E2 cam, to where it's going to feel just as good with a cam that will give you 7 to 8 feet per second more speed. So if that helps.
Yeah. And as we were talking earlier about the brace height, the 6.5 inch brace height, 338 feet per second, we were saying, 10 years ago,
we would have shot a crossbow with a
Impossible.
36 inch power stroke.
People, I don't know if people appreciate the difference between 6 and 6.5 and just how that feels, and in terms of forgiveness. Hey, I'm probably as imperfect as anybody, and that's a big difference for me. 6 inches, boy, I got to do stuff.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like, if I make a little mistake.
It
really
was surprising
amplified.
on the Levitate. When I got the Levitate and first started working with it, I never even checked, because I was so focused on the DFC carbon and like the feel of the shot. I was very focused on that. And then I was hyper focused on the fact of, I always wanted a wider cam to where it would take up more of the space. I mean, that's what's nice about this. There is not, like, in previous days, there would be a ton of spacers in between that cam and limb.
Yes.
And honestly, you never knew which way to do it on some of the bows. You could see flex in the axle. So I always wanted it wider just so that we could take that away. So there was so much focus on the Levitate, on the cam system and how it felt when I shot, that I just loved how it shot. And it wasn't until we made the spec sheet to where I'm like, wait a minute, it's got a 6 inch brace height. And I was like, that's too short. And then they're like, okay, well, it's what you've had for a year. And I was like, no, that can't be right. And then I measured and I'm like, it is. But then when I, drew it back, I'll put it on a draw board. I'll lay a piece of cardboard under it and then mark my string angles. You ever do that?
Yes.
And then you can start drawing other bows.
Yeah.
And look at your string angles, and you start to realize, like, okay, because some bows might have a bigger brace, but if they're shorter axle, the string angle might be sharper.
Yeah.
So I was surprised at that, because when I brought the NTN out, I was adamant about a 7 inch brace height, which was always, honestly, that was always my favorite, going back to like my Conquest, my Apex, and then moving into like some of the Pro Elites. I was always like chasing that 7. But the 6 in the levitate was not even a factor.
No.
Because there was not, the other thing too is like with limb angles and with string travel, like brace height you start to notice it when you have a lot of like over travel on limbs or over travel on string. You just really don't have that on this system. It's, the limbs are really going against each other up and down. It's dissipating, there's no jolt in bows anymore. There really isn't.
I was part of the testing for Outdoor Life magazine when we were testing bows last year, which the Levitate, we picked that as our bow of the year, best bow of the year. And part of it was that my position was I felt like that changed what your expectations of carbon should be. For me, I thought that it just was not what you expected from carbon. Mm-hmm. But then it was a nice bow to shoot, too.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, like you said, that 6-inch brace, even though that is shorter and I tend to notice a difference, I shot that bow well. And our editor, Alex Robinson, he took that thing out 50 yards. He Robin Hooded. He's never Robin Hooded one before. Shot 2 of them inside out there and as soon as he came back with that, I was like, he's going to pick that one too.
Well, what's crazy is so a week and a half ago I was hunting. Oh my gosh, Ruben Ochoa. I was hunting late season and it was minus 40 last week or a week and a half ago. So I'm like decked out in my Fanatic set, sitting in my blind and shoot a deer, perfect shot with a 6-inch brace height bow.
Yeah.
Dude, there's no way I would have been able to shoot bulky, heavy clothing with a bow with that brace height before.
Right.
I just think things were so different. And, not everyone can afford the carbon price tag.
Sure.
There's benefits to it. But what I will say is the geometry of this is, if you want to think of it this way, because it doesn't appear this way and it doesn't look this way, and you're probably not going to see it that way if you think of it, but essentially this is a Levitate built into an aluminum version. It's just different in how it's laid out. But you're actually getting a 1/2 inch more brace height, but you're attaining the same speeds.
Right.
Is where it was. So like, even engineer Kevin, who I work with, I personally always work with Kevin. Kevin was like, yeah, dude, crazy efficient.
Yeah.
Crazy efficient, because to get that and to still be getting 330 with the previous cam system, look at what the NTN speeds were at a 7-inch brace. Now we've only changed a 1/2 inch of brace, which should be 3 to 4 feet per second, right? But we're looking at 2.5 times the output, so it's just a more efficient system. You're getting out even more than you put in, which is pretty cool, because I remember like 5 or 6 years ago, talking with Zach Kurtzall and Darren Cooper, both, cam designing geniuses. And at the time I was at Hoyt, and I remember them saying, like, just from an efficiency point of view, compound archery is almost like terminal velocity, unless the only way you can really change it is if you reduce strand counts on strings. If you lighten up strings, you could change it. Shorten brace heights, you can change it. You can still get some speeds, but it's not real.
Right.
It's just fudging.
You're sacrificing.
Yeah, you're just kind of like fudging the cover, to show a number. So I'm really happy with it. I think it's a bulletproof, aluminum bow. Feels awesome in the hand and is super accurate.
So people sitting here listening to you talk about this, and you know this bow inside out and backwards. It's clear that you're putting all this unbelievable thought into it. What does that mean for you at this stage of your career to be doing this? I mean, you're a coach, you have the show and you go out hunting and all, but I can tell just listening to you talk about this is what you like doing.
Well, I don't want to make anything that I wouldn't shoot.
Right.
I don't. I want to shoot it. I want to shoot it, and it's honestly hard for me to put down a levitate because I freaking love that bow. I really, really like it, but I also just like the year where I shot the Embark. I could have shot any bow that PSE made, but I shot the Embark because I know there's people that only can spend $700 on a bow. There's people that are gonna work a lot of OT to spend $1,000 on a bow. So I really wanted to make something to where if someone is like busting their nuts to be able to afford a bow and they pick this one, I want them to be like, this thing was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like I got more bang for my buck with what I picked.
Right.
That's really what I want. And I'm hardly educated in anything other than experience. Like, I was not an engineer. I was not a trained engineer. have always been really weird about just watching people and being a stalker. So, having spent 10 years of my life, around like Matt McPherson and, Joel Maxfield and Gary Simons, and then another 10 years with Darren Cooper, Daniel, Zach. I mean, you listen to guys that are freaking geniuses, and you start to, and I always ask questions like, hey, I freaking hate why this thing looks like that. Why does it do that? So, I mean, I went to a lot of classes of asking a lot of questions to understand how it functions. And I've always been fortunate since 1998, I have been able to be shooting prototypes at least a year before people see them come out. And, when I was back at Matthews, there was a few of us, myself and Brandon and Joel, that set up bows and shot bows to where Matt's like, how does it shoot? How does it tune? And that was my job, is it tuned, and I was kind of the 100-yard guy. That was what my role was like, hey, here's what it'll do at 100 yards. And so that's really all I still do now, is I'm like, how fast can I make this shoot a bullet hole? And honestly, I'm not sure if I have a picture of this, but like, I have pictures that I send to the engineers to where it's pretty much my approval. Like, that was the first shot with the Gen 7 of the Unite.
Yeah.
First shot, eyeballing it with what I showed you, 90 degrees down the pipe was a bullet hole. The way the spacers came to me, which is how I kind of asked for them to come out of the box. Prior to that, with the Levitate 2.0, I actually built that bow with all three cam systems. I don't know if I have the picture close, but I built it with all three cams, eyeballed 3 setups, and I got a piece of paper that had 3 perfect bullet holes, and I just kind of said like, hey, this thing's good to go. And we had to change the limb pocket system, and we went to the new axle system on the new 2.0 Levitate, which is cool. So yeah, I don't know,
how is that for you, being that you were the Matthews 100-yard guy? You go to all these tacks, you go to the tacks every year, to see people now at this day and age, not that they're all driving tacks, but what they're able to do at 100 yards compared to
I could hire 1,200 100-yard people at a tack event. Yeah, it's really awesome because
not that they're all perfect shots, but they can do a lot more now than they could.
Well, like late 90s, early 2000s, Joel like rigged up this crazy like parts off some site to another site. We mounted them on Sherlocks so where we had 4-pin Sherlocks in 97 and 98. We had 4-pin hunting sights jerry rigged on Sherlock Supremes, and yeah, people would look at you like you're an idiot when you were saying I'm out practicing at 100 yards. They'd be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Now it's like I have gals come up to me and I'm like, hey, how long you been shooting for? I've been shooting, I don't know, 6 or 7 months. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll let these guys shoot here at 100 and then we'll move up. And they're just like, no, I'm good. It's like, okay, here we go. But that, you know what? That's a testament. That's a really important topic, because one of the things I'm a little bit bummed out about in our industry, if I'm honest, is every now and then I'll talk to a shop and I can sense animosity because they're like, well, yeah, I used to have people that would come in and I worked on all their stuff, and now they come in and they did their own this and they did their own that, and you think you're making everybody an expert. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make everybody stay in our sport.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do. And the fact that I see 50 people on a weekend at a total archery challenge that are the grassroots to our industry, the people that buy products from wherever they buy it, and I'm looking at them knowing that they have the ability to be every bit as good as I was during my prime, and they've been shooting 10 months. Dude, awesome. That is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome, because when people are doing well at something, they keep doing it. Who wants to suck at something forever?
Right.
I like to suck at something long enough to get me like pissed off to where I get better at it. And I'll if I suck long enough at something, I'll figure out a way to get over a plateau. We want the easiest, most efficient learning curve to get people into archery as humanly possible. Yeah. That's what we, as an industry, that is what we should want. And when there's people getting information out there that can help them self-diagnose, like, I don't know if our industry would have got through COVID if their ability to like turn on some videos and learn wasn't an option.
Right.
And if they were solely dependent on walking into a store, that could have been a hard few years for our industry, where we could have even lost people that are veterans to our industry.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. I didn't think the bow part would even be part of my equation, like as a person. When I was in that contract phase, and one of the things that PSE came forward to is like, hey, if you want your own bow, you could have it. And truth be told, this actually goes back 5 or 6 years ago. Someone came to me and they're like, hey, did you see there's like a keep hammering bow? And they go, how do you not have a bow? And I just said, well, I've never asked for one. And they're like, well, does it make you mad? I go, no, good for Cam. He asked for it. Yeah. Like, good for him. He wanted it. He made it, whatever he did to get his own bow. He got his own bow. Awesome.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't even on my map. I never even thought that was a thing. My focus was in a very different place. So I was like, hey, good for him. Good for him for that. And I remember being at the Innovation Show when Hoyt introduced the Bone Collector model, and that was like that was right at the beginning of the Bone Collector. And I remember like going up to Michael. It was right before the doors opened to the dealers. And I remember like kind of fist bumping Michael, and I go, dude, your freaking name's on a bow. And he's just like he looked at me like, he's like, can you freaking believe it? And I was like, this is so cool. Like freaking this guy, I mean, at the time, all three of them, but like, you know, Michael freaking went over a major hurdle of like becoming a major face of Realtree when there was already major faces there.
Yeah.
And then brought a team in with him that, you know, and they're all still together, which is super impressive.
Yep.
So I was like, hey, freaking good for the people that did it.
Yeah.
You know, they wanted it. They paid the dues that they had to do to get it. And when I knew that I was kind of a free agent, so to speak, when PSE said, hey, if you want to do a bow, we'll give you an engineer and you can just do whatever you want. It's not what I wanted at first, to be honest with you. And then I started thinking like, well, if I did one, what would that be? So the last 4 years have kind of just been things of like, what am I passionate about right now?
Right.
You know, which is awesome. And if I don't bring out something, I don't get heat. You know, I really do have the flexibility to do what I'm passionate about, what I'm being driven towards. So I'm pretty pumped too. I got the same face Waddell has. I'm freaking smiling right now. Like, yeah, that's pretty awesome. What's awesome to me is that I'm actually able to shoot something that I almost feel like I can make it shoot better because I have so much belief in it. That's always very hard for shooters. You know, I always wonder how many of our great pro archers, how much better they could be if they didn't have to change some years. Because like, you know, if you look at like when Jeff Hopkins was just dominating 3D back, you know, when I started 3D, or I actually let's go pre Hopkins, let's go to Ulmer. You know, when Ulmer had that freaking Browning bow that was cobbled together and just was dominating people, he just kept shooting that thing. And there was like, it's not like Browning was at the 3D events like putting pressure on him to like, they weren't bringing out new target bows every year. He just had this bow that shot good, and when he showed up with that sucker, like you were hoping he didn't have a freaking day like he normally did.
Yeah.
And then when Hopkins got on a roll with that freaking Bear Omnistar or whatever the hell he had, he freaking dominated with that thing. And then when Dave Stepp came in with the single cam high country that he freaking cobbled together, you know, first guy to win 6 figures in a year shooting a bow, and he just, like, there was a time where people weren't having to change all the time. They were actually like cobbling stuff together that like suited them.
Yeah, it worked.
And their style, because honestly, all three of those guys I just mentioned had very different techniques. And they were able to make something work that they put together and not have to change. Like for a target archer, part of the reason why I left target archery is because it really restricts your hunting season. Because you better be 60 days into training right now prepping for a Lancaster Classic. Like you can't get done with my late season hunt 2 weeks ago and be ready for Lancaster.
Yeah.
Like not when there's people there that don't miss and that don't hunt, and they've been doing it since August when everyone else stopped. They just kept practicing. So yeah, it's interesting. I think for me, I'm lucky to be kind of my best self right now. I feel like I'm better at 46 than I was in my 30s, for sure. But I think it's because I'm also not feeling forced to shoot something that I didn't have part of.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Well, what do you want to talk about, PJ? You just
I
let me ramble about.
Absolutely. I just like sitting here and listen because I like listening to people. This is what I do. I interview people, and I can just tell by the level of detail that you're going into that this is something that you really are into. You love it. I watch your videos. I see your teachings and stuff like that, but this is a different level of that passion in archery.
Yeah.
And it's just cool. I just like to sit and listen.
It is cool. To be fair, to be 100% fair, even when I'm very, very thankful for PSE, I'm very thankful, that Pete made that happen, because obviously, this would have never been part of my life's journey without PSE. Would have never happened. Me doing that sort of thing with any other company just doesn't fit the other company's, just their strategy.
Right.
But what I will say is, this is an awesome year for amazing products in our industry. I've a lot of other brands send me stuff and ask my opinion, and there is no better time to be a consumer in archery than 2023. I can tell you that right now.
That is for sure.
There is some really, really freaking awesome gear. No doubt. I mean, it's hard to, I guess, beat when we've already got perfect scores in target archery. But I certainly think there's going to be personal records. This 2023 will go down in history for personal records for people that are beginners all the way up to pros. There is nothing holding us back from an equipment point of view in our industry from being the best we can be. Yeah. And I guess my biggest passion, way more so than bows, is to make people the best archer they can be. That's 100% my drive, is to I want to just teach. I just even with this, I told them, you guys are cramping, you're cramping into my freaking content time here, because I have a goal. Last year I did just over 200 videos for 2022. This year I'm gonna do 300. Nice. That's where my passion is, and these are just tools that let me get there. Yeah. And you guys are too. I mean, you guys have been an awesome partner with me since, hey, Rob.
There he is.
How long have we been together, bro? I can't even, the first Lancaster trailers that I remember, being there with Bill Scott on one side and Scott Slates on another side. When was that? Mid 90s? Yeah. This is
early to mid 90s.
So we're talking 30 years. Me and Rob have been seeing this stuff. There's no better time in the industry, and it's so cool Lancaster has literally fought and ground to become the leader in target archery and to always support it. And then crossed over into the hunting world, and it's just so cool that there is crossover now between really good target archers and what that means to make really, really good bow hunters.
The bow hunters becoming more educated. Thanks to you. Thank you.
Yeah, we're finally archers. Yeah. We're not bow hunters and target guys. We are archers. That's what our community is. Bow hunters can shoot freaking good. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of European pro target shooters specifically that are open-minded to hunting and being dude, I love the idea of knowing where my food comes from. Yeah. It's these brands are the segue for those things to cross over, and that's the lifeblood to our industry. Like, that's what's going to keep this industry around, is for there not to be a division within our own community. You know, it's not like bow hunter, target archer.
Yeah.
Public land, private land. Like, all those are a line in the sand to where we should all just be like, let's all live the beach life, man. Let's just walk the whole thing. We don't need lines in the sand.
Well, you talk about the educational portion of it, and so Rob, who's going to hire a guy like me in archery?
Rob.
What am I going to do in archery? But his idea was, hey, let's educate people. All these products here. How do you get them to people who aren't here?
Yeah.
That was his idea, and just said,
indeed.
hey, come in, show them what it looks like, tell them all about it, and hey, maybe that sparks interest, you know.
100%.
People see this stuff, so yeah, it's just been great. John, we always appreciate having you around. It's always good to talk to you.
Thank you, my man. I appreciate it.
Love it. We're excited to see the Unite out and about and see people getting their hands on this and shooting it, and we're just excited for 2023.
So awesome. See you, everybody. Be sure to check out knockonarchery.com for our full line of custom designed products, as well as free in-depth education and bow hunting entertainment to help you shoot at your best.